for educational critical review and reaction is the late, great Jordan Maxwell.
We've been talking, Jeffrey and I have, to ourselves, we've been talking about the subject of transhumanism and the crossbreeding that was going on back in the 30s and 40s and probably even before that in Russia back in early 1900s, and then follow up in Germany. With the whole idea of crossbreeding animals and humans together, and the Nazi experiments that were going on before and are still going on today, the whole world network, what we would refer to as the Nazi Party. The whole Nazi operation is very, very well, highly financed, extremely well positioned in the world to carry on the Nazi ideology. And so while we may think that the Nazis were defeated in the Second World War, nothing could be further from the truth. They are very healthy and doing quite well, thank you. They have plenty of money. They have all the technology, the German minds that were brought here to America and to Central and South America, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay and Paraguay. Our Americas, North and Central and South America, are just replete with Nazi scientists, Nazi theoreticians. And so what was going on behind the scenes, and I do mean way behind the scenes of what we came to know as Nazism in Germany, there was a bigger picture going on behind the Nazi empire. And this is why the United States and the British and European bankers and industrialists were financing with money, with food, materials, the big oil companies, the automotive industry in America and Europe were financing, providing oil and half-trucks and tanks and jeeps and all the equipment needed for war was being provided to the Nazis by the United States and by the UK, corporations in the UK, and in Europe in general. And so behind the scenes of what we today think of as Nazi movement or the Nazi Party was a far, far bigger operation going on in which American money and industry was highly interested in and was financing and producing products for the Nazis to use in the war. So the bottom line was that there's something far bigger going on than what you think the Nazis were involved in. And that is the whole entire restructuring of the human race. And it had nothing to do with politics at all. It has to do with something far, far bigger, far more dynamic. It has to do with the complete changeover of human civilization to a totalitarian dictatorship around the world, in which the whole entire human family on the earth will eventually, according to their plan, will eventually be sucked into an absolute new world order. And this is where we've heard all of our politicians, all of our favorite politicians in America talking about and they're gleefully and happily talking about the coming new world order. Of course, Adolf Hitler talked about the New World Order. The Nazis were very big on publishing articles and talking about the New World Order. And so also in Russia and with the takeover of Russia by the communists, they began talking about the New World Order that they foresaw. And so the bottom line is that it was ultimately not just a war between the East and the West, or between the Allies and between the Allies in Germany, but there was a bigger war going on behind the scenes that I personally believed way far outweighed the human involvement. It was obviously, to my way of thinking, obviously something far, far more dangerous and more evil than the war itself. And that is the real purpose behind financing, organizing, directing the whole world Nazi movement. And that is some kind of a hidden, you might say conspiracy, some sort of a hidden agenda to recreate the whole human race. And so we know that there was a lot of that kind of experimentation going on in Nazi Germany. Back in the 1938-39, in Hollywood, movie actor Charles Lawton made a movie in Hollywood called The Island of Lost Souls. Charles Lawton, 1938-39, The Island of Lost Souls. Later on, I remember that in 1965, I think it was, Burt Lancaster made a remake of The Island of Lost Souls, and it was called The Island of Dr. Moreau. And, of course, the last movie that Marlon Brando made before his passing was The Island of Dr. Moreau. And it's an extraordinary story based on real, factual events in the history of the world, where very, very evil people, scientists and politicians, were conspiring together to crossbreed animals and humans. It's an extraordinary story, and there's a lot of information out there on that. But most people have never heard of the real background to what Nazis were doing, to what the elite who are financing, organizing, and directing all of this demonic depravity, what their vision of the future for the human race really is. And so that's what we want to talk about tonight with Jeffrey and myself. The idea that there's a whole war going on to undermine human civilization and to ultimately completely destroy it and put in its place on the earth a whole new kind of human. And this is what we are enjoying the very beginnings of with computers, because computers go all the way back to Nazi Germany. I mean, the Germans had computers, and after the Second World War, computers started catching on very big in industry, and today they're everywhere. And so on the one hand, computers are fascinating and wonderful for communication, but you got to remember it has the dark side too, and it developed by a lot of the technology was developed by the Germans and the Nazis in particular. So we wanted to talk about the transformation of the human race by, as I said, a well-heeled, well-financed, highly organized, and very powerful Nazi movement in the world today. And if you don't understand what I mean, you better listen closely to people like Joseph Farrell. You need to listen to an extraordinary researcher and author named Joseph Farrell, Farrell. He talks a lot about the modern-day Nazi world movement, and it's behind so much of going on in the Middle East. That was Nazis that were in the Middle East before. They still are today. So much of what's going on in Europe and in the Middle East today, without a doubt, has Nazi theoreticians, politicians, scientists working to overthrow that whole area of the world, and God knows what they're planning on doing with it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this strange kind of science that's going on right now that people, generally speaking, are not aware of. And I want to play a little 3 or 4 minute piece that I think is very interesting, talking about the underworld of occult sciences manipulating the human race, and also the implication that the UFO and the alien presence in this story might be far bigger and more important than you think it is. So I want to play this little piece for you. It's only about 3.5 minutes long, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay. The method, as they call it, though it was more so a germline procedure of singular metascientific complexity, had been given to them by the alien colonists as a quid pro quo. The syndicate would help them to create a population of alien hybrids who would hide in plain sight, cloned from human ova and alien biomaterial. So there would be a cloned race immune to the effects of the black oil when the return to the planet began. For this, the syndicate would be sequestered, granted a sort of immunity or asylum, given a place in the grander scheme. They were the Vichy government to the German final solution, collaborationists whose motivation was simple, self-directed survival. These cloning operations were spread across the country, the cataloging and record-keeping done through a complex intra-institutional system that connected to every branch of government, from the Social Security Administration to the Department of Defense. The operation, under the working title Purity Control, had been launched in 1948. Its original conception, the brainchild of German scientists given immunity themselves from war crimes, and allowed to continue the eugenic experiments that were Hitler's dark legacy. The syndicate had begun as a subset of a shadow intelligence agency whose original orders were to create plausible denial and an effective cover-up of purity control. But through 50 years, numerous U.S. and UN administrations, the principles began to wrest control, accumulating power and influence across international borders. Such that by 1990, the operation ceased to have a member accountable to any one government, and whose only orders would be taken from a man named Strughold, a German industrialist who had fled his homeland to northern Africa. These men, whose knowledge and access provided control of a foreseeable future, had in spite of this everything to lose. Their secret work, the cloning preparations, and the cataloging constituted their greatest vulnerability: exposure. Their detection would ensure not just their own demise, but a far-reaching dissolution of social and religious order around the globe. To protect against this, the syndicate employed methods of disinformation, using covert government programs that had been regrettably discovered as a kind of smokescreen, a dodge or blind where the transgressions of Congress-accountable agencies served to hide their own more odious undertaking. They had even at times used the UFO phenomenon to create an hysteria that science and the intelligentsia denounced so completely as to make belief and believers seem ridiculous and completely discreditable. They had also, in a crisis, used a tool of the colonists themselves, alien bounty hunters who policed the cloning operations and enforced rule on the countdown to colonization. A double-edged sword whose cold-blooded tactics could help to stem a leak or threat, but who also kept watch on the syndicate. A threat in itself, as the syndicate had something to hide that not even the colonists knew of. A vaccine against the black oil. An inoculant against the substance in which the alien life force was held. In fact, the very medium of the life force itself. To guard this secret was perhaps even more critical than the truth of the existence of alien life and of colonization. If the syndicate's own secret vaccine were discovered, a vaccine that would make themselves immune from the effects of the black oil, they would certainly be destroyed and the timetable for colonization stepped up. They would protect this secret with their lives. They would kill to protect it, as it symbolized the only hope they had of avoiding enslavement when the planet was overtaken. That they had been able to, over decades, conduct their work on the vaccine undetected was a result of a code among the syndicate members that put honor and the future above personal politics. But now this code was beginning to break down. An incipient scramble for power beginning to develop. A threat from within that doubled the threat from without.
All right, this piece that we just heard was taken from the X-Files music audio, and it was on there, and just using it to illustrate what I'm talking about, that there is an ongoing scientific worldwide scientific work going on, which we, in America, we refer to it as black ops and black projects, meaning they are hidden from view from the public. But these black ops of crossbreeding animals with humans and doing whatever the Nazis ultimately had in mind to do with their alien knowledge and technology. I'm completely sure in my mind that the whole operation of what we call the Nazi movement around the world was being orchestrated behind the scenes by very powerful men, elitists, what we would call elitists in America, who are themselves connected to secret societies and fraternal orders, which are financing, organizing, directing, financing, and feeding and producing materials for the Nazi Party today, right now today, just as they were doing it during the Second World War. And so many of our banks in America made their money and became wealthy during the war because of their financing the war for Adolf Hitler and sending him all the raw materials that he needed. So I think that there's some sort of a world catastrophe coming where the human family is slowly but surely being phased out in preference to a new civilization of people which will have no connection to the freedom, the liberties, the justice, the emotional foundations for civilization. All of that will be weeded out soon. All of that's going to eventually be dropped, and we will have a new kind of civilization where people will be enslaved in a totalitarian dictatorship worldwide, but it won't be as so obvious. People will blend themselves to it. People will bend to the prevailing powers that be, and we already see that even in America, even in Europe. We're seeing the people of Europe and America are very easily bending themselves and accepting and submitting to the totalitarian fascist world movement, which I am saying again is being orchestrated behind the scenes by the world Nazi movement. But people don't really seem to see what they're doing. They're just being sucked into the system and do not realize what they're being sucked into. So today we have Americans who are delighted to put on the uniforms, take the billy clubs, take the badges, and now they have been given permission by the Führer to do whatever they want. They can play God at the airports. They can play God on the streets. The police are playing God over the whole human race. Everybody has to be in compliance to the Führer and to Berlin. This whole monstrosity of destruction of law and order is just an amazing to me how the people of America and Europe and the world in general will bend to this and put on the uniforms and go right along with subjugating their own fellow man, their fellow citizens. How many people, Americans, are in these agencies like the FBI, the CIA, and NSA? They're Americans, coming from the same country we are, and yet they are working day and night behind the scenes to destroy our country, our freedoms, our people, our morals, our ethics. They're working day and night to destroy their own country and their own people. And so all of this I see as all part and parcel of some sort of a world movement to ultimately destroy the very foundations of civilization. And there's an article that just appeared on the Organic Consumers Association put out an article that was entitled, "New Federal Guidelines Will Allow the Creation of Human-Animal Genetics to Crossbreed Humans and Animals." So we now have the federal government saying, "Oh, well, it's okay to do that. We're just going to experiment. We're not going to do anything with it. We're just going to experiment and see if we can crossbreed animals and humans." So that should tell you something about Washington, D.C., and about government throughout the world, how far gone mentally and emotionally and spiritually and integrity the governments of this world, and especially Washington, D.C., how far gone they really are and how far removed from humanity they really are. People are mentally and criminally insane. Crossbreeding animals and humans, it's just a frightening story, but I know that it has something to do with the background of the Nazi movement, because so many hundreds, if not thousands, of Nazi scientists were brought here to America, and they became very well entrenched in our government, and today they're carrying out their Nazi philosophies and ideas right under our noses, and we call it the U.S. government. Never realized for a minute where this great country of America and the rest of the world with us, where we're really going. So that's what we wanted to talk about tonight. And I have my friend Jeffrey, which I have hogged too much of the show. I want to bring Jeffrey on because there's so many things he brings up that's very interesting to me. So we wanted to just play you that part, and that was from the X-Files. But anyway, Jeffrey, are you still with us?
Absolutely. I heard everything you said, and thank you for having me on the show again. I really appreciate it, and giving me an opportunity to be part of something really extraordinary. The subject matter that you're talking about, I had to create a way of handling it because it's so difficult to swallow all this stuff that I tried to do a lot of stuff like go out and hang out with friends and see movies and enjoy shopping at farmers markets and doing all this stuff because it's such heavy duty stuff. So I always try to remind myself that there has to be as much of a balance as possible to enjoy your life, enjoy the blessings in your life, and create value with your family and friends as much as possible. And getting to the subject of what you're talking about, this Nazi movement, these programs, the clip that you played, I really, couple of things stood out to me is that they were saying in the 40s, and there's a multi-decade project. The thing that I've been trying to understand, and it's something I've tried to relay in the last two shows, is that whatever we're learning on the internet today or whatever we're finding in books, it's most of the time older than what is being said. And one of the things that I found in the beginning is we were talking about artificial intelligence before we go to the transhumanism stuff, is that a corporation is a precursor to artificial intelligence, and devices that would be considered computers, they've existed for thousands of years, like the Antikythera mechanism found off the coast of Greece. It's dated way back, almost 2,000 years old, mapping out the cycles of the planets, the moon, even the four-year calendar, which is basically the precursor to the Olympic Games cycle every 4 years. So when you move into the transhumanism, well, I'm thinking, there's a lot of modern day examples that I'm going to attach to that clip that you played. But transhumanism, to me, is in my face apparent in Egypt. And the reason why is because even though I'm not an expert on hieroglyphics, but Hollywood and Egypt itself and their hieroglyphics, they have all kinds of humans with animal heads. And it's been going on for a long time. So that's a little bit of an assumption on my end. But it wouldn't surprise me that there was an intellectual understanding that somehow that knowledge of crossbreeding chimeras and all this kind of stuff. It's been going on for a long time, but now it's big business and it's big money. It's not about control and social order. It's about making money and preparing whatever's left of the human family for intergalactic travel. And this is a subject I used to shy away from because, it just sounds too Fruit Loopy. It's like, how do you prove this to somebody? How do you transmit this kind of concept if they haven't looked at it at all? And not come across like, where are you getting this from? How can you confirm any of it? Well, transhumanism, the first ancient example, as I mentioned, is in the hieroglyphs, but there's stuff that I found that's just absolutely mind-boggling. I actually had to lay down and rest because I couldn't handle it at first. In 1940, the Russians, supposedly, they have a video, and, again, this is not for the faint of heart, and it's definitely not for children. But, some people, they say, well, I don't believe any of this stuff, and I don't believe until I see it. Well, I think you can go on YouTube, you can type in Russian scientist successfully reanimates dead dog's head in 1940. If you type in something to that effect, you'll find it. It's like a 2 or 3 minute thing, and it's the real deal. And, it starts off with these kinds of programs that you're talking about, these militarized programs, where they want to see what can be done and how it can be done. And they can sign. And if this movie came out in 1940, God knows what they were doing. Again, going back to the first concept of that, whatever you see now, it's older than what it's what it's being said. And so maybe this might be hundreds of years old. But this is the first time that they're willing to show it. That must mean that they're way, way, way ahead. And they have other examples too. I think the other clip, and if it's okay with you, Jordan, I have it's a little 3-minute clip, but I really believe in it because instead of someone saying, well, I did some research and I used the internet and I found a book somewhere, not that these are not extremely valuable, but sometimes hearing from the man who did a head transplant, from the man who was able to remove a brain from an animal and keep it alive, and hear him talk about it himself from his own mouth, his own mind, it might, ring true in somebody and say, you know what, it's okay to know about this material, but it's also important to know what you and individually can do in your own research and how you can change your life to adapt yourself to not get stuck in all this stuff, to not get caught up in it, and to not get caught up in all the darkness that is being pumped into the system, and aim your life in a better direction. Sometimes you have to look at the truth. And I was hoping I could play this little audio clip of 2.5 minutes.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'd like for you to. Yeah, I'd like you to do that. But also I was going to say that, and just remember that even as far back as 1900, 1910, right around that era, Ivan G. Pavlov and A.R. Luria, Pavlov and Dr. Luria were working with dogs, the Pavlonian dogs, stuff that was going on, where they were playing with the brains of animals, and that was in the beginning. They were actually going to be working on the human brain, but they were testing out a lot of preliminary research on the animals first, and this was in pre-Soviet Russia, before the communists. It was already the Russians were already working on these dark experiments that were going to be aimed at the human family later. And so, and a lot of people know about the Pavlonian dog, but my God, there was so much more to that. And so, yeah, why don't you play this? This was about a doctor who was able to take the brain out of an animal and keep it alive. And I think he's actually was involved with doing the same thing with humans, taking a human brain out and keeping it alive. It's extraordinary scientific stuff, but there's also, in my opinion, totally sick, because it implies that whoever is at the top of this world in science are doing things which are absolutely outrageous, and it doesn't bode well for where the human family is going. And so, yeah, if you want to play that, do that. It's only a couple of minutes long.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Dr. Robert White is a neurosurgeon at the Cleveland Medical Hospital in Ohio.
Now, here are some pictures.
In 1963, he performed the first experiment to keep a brain alive outside the body.
That's the human skull here. That's unreal. This is a gorilla. See here, when you take the brain out and isolate it, you can take all that if you want. And you keep it alive and live forever. See, this is a human brain, actually, and it is fixed. So no one needs to worry about it being alive. There have been many attempts throughout the world, particularly in the old Soviet Union, to take the brain out of an animal. They like the dog, for example, and keep it alive with machinery. Now, you can do that with the heart, the kidney, the liver, the lung, all the other body organs, solid organs. But nobody had ever been able to do it with the brain. And part of the reason is we must remember the brain is very delicate when it comes to its blood supply. And so when we finally did it and found that this brain of a highly developed animal had brain waves, good biochemistry, was functioning just as it would. Now, we couldn't talk to it. We could send it electrical signals. We could show that it could actually hear and so forth, but we didn't know whether it was processing the information. But the point of it all is that that moment in time also said to us, if you can do it for the animal brain, you could do it for the human brain. This incredibly brilliant scientist, Stephen Hawking, who was an astrophysicist, actually, he is now in a wheelchair and literally speaks via a computer. And some people, perhaps unkindly, have described this wonderful man as sort of the head on the computer, basically. But he would be somebody who potentially could survive his diseased body through a total body transplant.
To prove that the brain was in fact functioning normally while in this state, Dr. White needed to undertake a second experiment, during which he succeeded in transplanting the head of a monkey onto the body of another. The creature survived for 7 days before the body rejected the head.
In the monkey experiments, these animals are as much a monkey as they were when they were in their own original body. So I would presume, and I'd go beyond that, I would be assured that the monkey personality is retained. So consciousness can be transplanted. Obviously, personality, I want to speak of the monkey having personality, can be transferred. And so you might ask, where did this bring us as far as the human spirit or soul goes? And I guess you could argue it can be transplanted.
So there's the clip. I hope it was clear enough, but it's a Dr. White in Cleveland, Ohio in the early 60s that somehow, I mean, just the approach that he's taking, you know, like everybody knows about it, he's just described. For me, it was very difficult for me to swallow. But you know, there's all kinds of movies out there, and there's all kinds of media that helps people come to terms with this without it being as shocking, and they make it more palatable. They have an old TV show, I think from the early 70s, called The $6 Million Man, and it's coming down to another movie in the 70s called The Resurrection of Zachary Wheeler, which is not well known at all. It has Leslie Nielsen in there. The guy was in Naked Gun. I'm sure, you know, people, you know, again, and also THX 1138, Ford Coppola and Lucas, you know, all these things. But I think from the more recent material out there that really stood out to me are 3 movies. A TV series called Black Mirror, and I think season 4 is particularly interesting for those of you who have not seen it. I highly recommend it.
It was called what?
Black Mirror. And it's a British. Well, some of the acting is British and some of it's American. But Black Mirror has food for thought about what is happening to the human mind, what is happening to the human spirit. Where one episode, the soldiers of the future are given an implant, and the enemies look like demons. So it's easier for the soldier to take out the enemy or the target. So if I were to project an image into your mind, and the person that you have to kill, instead of looking like a little boy or a woman in a village or a young man in a farm field, it looks like a 7-armed demon. Well, I think a 7-armed demon holding, 16 knives or something like that, it's going to be easier to take care of business. Yep. And so these are the kinds of things, like, again, Black Mirror is not the perfect answer, but it's just an idea for people to refer themselves to. But a much milder version, much more easier to swallow, is a movie called Code 46. And Code 46 is, it's a movie about artificial intelligence and the epigenetics and the weeding out of the human genome, the bad apples out of the human genetic pool, and people to enhance their capabilities. They take viruses that are designer viruses. But I don't want to give away the movie. It's not a fast-paced movie like the Avengers or something like that. It's more of a slower-paced movie. And
it was called what again?
Code 46. I highly recommend you rent it if it's on Netflix or something like that, or if you go to your local store or whatever. But one of the most important movies that I want to mention, and it's not just because it's popular, it's because what it represents. And it's the Terminator. Now, the Terminator, everybody's going to say, well, gosh, that's nothing new here. But actually, James Cameron, I never really paid attention as much about how do they get these stories. And then as I watched more movies over the years, I said, how did they do it? And the Terminator was, I think it was put out in 1984. And the American Film Institute did a survey internally to see all the top 50 heroes ever in the movie world and the top 50 villains. And the only one that actually won the prize for both was the Terminator. The Terminator in the first one was the ultimate, one of the top 50 ultimate bad guys. And he was also the number one of the top good guys in the top movies in Terminator 2. And I was thinking, the year that the Terminator was set for this horrible future was in 2029. And if I go on the internet and I look up, I think it's, what's the gentleman's name? The Turing test. And he's the man who was saying that computers will double in power every 18 months or something like that. Well, there's a futurist named Ray Kurzweil, and he was predicting that it would be in the year 2020. And that was in 1990. He was saying that the computers and the humans would the computers would reach a point where they could possibly take over. He was making that prediction in 1990. It'd be around 2020, but in the year 2005, he revised his estimate to 2029. So Ray Kurzweil is not a type of guy to align his predictions with the movie. He's going to align his predictions with science. He works for Google. He's not working for mowing lawns in the summer for extra money. He's involved with some high-end stuff. So if he's saying it's 2029, so then that makes me think, well, how did James Cameron come up with 2029? He's not guessing either at a multi-million dollar budget that has to be signed off on years before 1984, where it actually came out. So where are these Hollywood producers and directors getting this knowledge? Again, it comes back to what you were saying, Jordan. These programs, these are decades, if not hundreds of years old. And some people are in the know and some people aren't. And the other thing, too, as a final note on the Terminator is that in 2008, the Terminator was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry. because it was deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. What that tells me, just a regular guy, is that the Library of Congress is not a startup food truck. It's the Library of Congress. And they're not testing out to see if you'll like this new type of fish taco. They're basically putting out there that the Terminator is so important as a concept, culturally and historically significant, that they're putting it into their National Film Registry to preserve it. And so that tells me something, that this is not just a radio show.
No, it's not just a movie.
And it's not just a topic just to entertain you.
No.
So,
and that should tell you something else too about Hollywood. Hollywood made that movie, and Schwarzenegger is in it, and that should tell you something too, from where Schwarzenegger comes from Austria, and Austria, Germany, and it's like I said before. There is a far bigger project working right now around the world, and that we think the Nazis were defeated. They were not. They lost a battle. They didn't lose the war. They lost a particular battle, but they didn't lose the war. And the war is still on. And then when you find out how big and how powerful and how financially powerful the Nazi Party is today around the world, I've heard all kinds of estimates, and I also was reading an article about that I don't recall where I read it. I don't know if it's true or not, but it was an article dealing with the financing of the Nazi Party, and they brought out that in the article it talked about how the Nordic companies, German and Austrian companies, and some in the Nordic area, corporations and companies still pay a small percentage of their profits each year to the Nazi Party, the old Nazi Party. And so that some of the big, some of the big German companies and Austrian companies, and from the Netherlands and Sweden are still today sending money to the Nazis, which are hidden away, and so they are very well taken care of financially. They have plenty of money. Plus, they are operating behind the scenes with black projects in America with the CIA and the NSA and NASA and all of these other so-called American agencies, which are actually nothing more than Nazi operations, period. The people who are running them were Nazis, and people who are working for them for these agencies are Nazis. So the Nazi Party is not over. It's not at all over. It's very well conditioned today for what it's doing. It's very highly financed. And all of these really strange movies and stories coming out about crossbreeding animals with humans, and humans interacting with aliens, and aliens from other worlds communicating with humans. Even Christianity talks about the good and bad demons, and the good and bad angels, and the bad ones are demons, and they are corrupting mankind. Well, I think there's something to that idea, but I think it's scientifically something that the Germans were heavily involved in, and what the United States and England were heavily involved in. And so the bottom line on this, as far as I'm concerned, is that there's a bigger operation going on, something far, far bigger that dwarfs whatever we think we're doing in a war. No, there's something very serious going on the earth that involves all the human family, and we are being messed with by some very highly intelligent but also intellectually brilliant people who are megalomaniacs and mentally deranged, but they're the mad scientists who are working with off-world entities, off-world technologies. So I'm frightened for the future, because I can see where the human race is being slowly but surely phased out and dumbed down, phased out little by little. put to death with the chemtrails and all the poisons in our food and poisons in the air and all this new high technology with nanotechnology, flying over American cities and dropping materials which are microscopic by trillions of little microscopic technology that we breathe in, that goes onto our plants, and when we're harvesting the plants, you're eating these little highly technical devices. And so I see the world of mankind is now in serious trouble. But the problems are so large and so enormous in size that I don't think the human family even gets we don't get it, how bad off we really are and how frightening this world really, in fact, is, and that the Nazis lost the war, but they didn't lose. They lost the battle, but they didn't lose the war. Well, they're still here. They're still here today. We call it American science. All it is Nazism regurgitated.
Again, I always hesitate about talking about such dark material because I don't want the impression to be that it's only this. It's just that if you don't know what the picture is, then you're never going to be able to evolve yourself to the next level. If you study this 24/7, you won't. There's going to be some serious problems, but if you do it in a phased approach, and if you have good family and friends, and you take care of yourself, and you do the best you can in your personal life, and then you try to incorporate understandings that are 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 years old, you can be an extremely powerful personal individual. And one of the things I loved, I don't know if it's available still on the internet, but if you go on Google and you type in Ghost in Your Genes documentary, I think it's from the year 2006. There's a whole bunch of results, but the one you want is from the BBC. It's the Ghost in Your Genes 2006. And this one really unlocked a lot of ideas in my mind, and it wasn't scary. It was actually very, very extremely informative, and it helped me understand without the concern. But at the same time, another example of how transhumanism was being thought of, I would dare say, one example, it's been done for a long time, but one example as early as 1693 was the Amish people. These people, they're not interested in adapting themselves and getting all this kinds of modification. So somebody knew a long, long time ago, hundreds of years ago, that there's going to be technology that's going to take us off Earth and take us to other planets. It will still be on Earth, but we need a pool of humans, so we have to create a religion around it. And so the Amish people, and again, I don't have any ill will towards any of these people, but I'm just using the example of these people want to remain as untouched as possible. So it's not about questioning their religion or questioning, but it's speaking of the wars and the darkness. One of the things that's not really well discussed, and I got to make this point quickly, is that each country has its own agenda, from the pharmaceutical / biomedical / agricultural standpoint. In India, the chances of you dying from Alzheimer's are almost zero. But if you're in Canada or the U.S. or some parts of Europe, it's way up there. And so each country, they're harvesting the data, and they're creating a platform so that the humans can be cured if we ever leave this Earth and we go to the moon, we go to Mars, we go to somewhere else. We'll have the capability, just like in that movie, I think it's called Elysium. You just sit down in bed and it'll know how to fix you. So that's the upside of technology. But the problem is to get to that point, a lot of people have to suffer and die. And the other thing too is that today's, geopolitics, with this whole thing with immigration, illegal immigration, there's all these problems in the Middle East and Islam in particular, is that if I look up the etymology of the word Catholic, it means universal. And if I look up the etymology of Islam, it means surrender or submit. Now, of course, they're probably, if the people who are of that faith will probably say, well, you submit to the word of Allah or to the life of Allah or whatever, of God. But it really literally means to surrender. And if I were to pin down what one of your previous guests was saying, I think his name was Kurt, saying that if you're born in the Western world and you have a birth certificate, that basically means you're Catholic. Well, if that were the case, that means everybody in the entire faith of Islam is a Catholic, because they're part of the Universal Church, and Islam goes to the Vatican. It's not the other way around. And I really had a hard time finding stuff. It was very difficult to try to find out if Islam was researching as a religion, as a religious organized religion, artificial intelligence and transhumanism, and it's super tough to find material. I can go on, at least in English, maybe there's vast sums of information in their language, but in English it's almost unheard of. It's always AI is trying to catch the bad guys using AI instead of them actually studying it. And the only two articles that I found was one called 21st Century Islam, Artificial Intelligence. And my goodness, you can find it, but it's not easily found. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that there's a name that please forgive me if I don't pronounce it correctly, but they're saying if they program a robot with Islam, or the Quran, as their foundation, that there's a man named the Sheikh Abu Murtad al-Maldifi, and he says how to handle robots whose Islam programming malfunctions, or literally what to do with robots that lose their faith. I'm just wondering, to me, I don't have multiple doctorates like an astronaut, but to me it doesn't make any sense if a robot losing any faith. And so and here's a quote from him: if a robot were to commit apostasy, claims the Sheikh, it will be an important jurisprudential issue.
Well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to cut it off here because we're just running out of time.